The door opened before I could say a word. "Wait, Ethan!" I gasped, clutching my towel tighter. He froze in the doorway, his eyes wide, face pale with panic. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were." He didn't finish. He turned around so quickly he almost tripped over his own shoes. I stood there, heart racing, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden shock of it all. Ethan hadn't even been home for more than a few hours. He'd arrived late last night from college, taller, older, with that quiet confidence that reminded me too much of his father. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "It's okay." I called after him, but he was already gone. It wasn't what it looked like. It was just awkward. But still, something about the moment felt strange, like a reminder that time had moved on faster than I noticed. I got dressed and went downstairs. The house was unusually quiet. My husband, Daniel, had already left for work. He'd been distant lately, busy, tired, always on his phone. I found Ethan in the kitchen, pouring coffee, trying to pretend the morning hadn't happened. "Hey," I said gently. He glanced up, his face flushed. "Morning. Sorry about earlier. I swear I didn't know you were in there." I smiled, trying to ease the tension. "It's fine, really. You just scared me, that's all." He handed me a mug. "Truce." I took it, smiling. "Truce." He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, it's weird being back here. Everything feels smaller." "That's because you've grown," I said. "Both in height and in heart, I hope." He smiled, that same shy, boyish smile he used to give me when I first tried to talk to him years ago. Back then, he'd barely say a word. Losing his mother young had built invisible walls around him. It took time to earn his trust. Now, standing across from him in the kitchen, I realized how much of a man he'd become. The day went by slowly. The quiet of the house pressed against me. Daniel texted once. "Running late. Don't wait for dinner." I sighed, staring at my phone. Ethan walked in just then, a box in his hands. "I found this in the attic. Thought you'd want to see it." He placed the box on the table. It was old, covered in dust. Inside were photo albums. Some of me and Daniel, and others from before I came into their lives. "This must be from your mom's time," I said quietly. He nodded, sitting down beside me. "Yeah, I didn't know Dad still kept them." I turned the pages slowly. Pictures of birthdays, road trips. Her smile so warm it almost hurt to look at. "She was beautiful," I said softly. "She was," he murmured. "And so are you." I looked up surprised. His tone wasn't strange, just sincere, filled with that quiet honesty that only comes from someone speaking without thinking too much. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, we sat there. Two people connected not by blood, but by something deeper. Shared loss, and the fragile peace that followed it. Later that evening, it started to rain. The kind of rain that soaks the world in silver and memory. I was in the living room when Ethan walked in, carrying his laptop. "Mind if I sit here? Wi-Fi's better in this corner." "Of course," I said, smiling. He sat on the couch across from me, typing something quietly. Every now and then, our eyes met, not awkwardly, just naturally. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, silence settled in like an old friend. After a while, he spoke without looking up. "You make this house feel like home again." I didn't know what to say. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot, Ethan." He smiled, just a little. "You're welcome." The power flickered, then went out. We both laughed, startled by the darkness. "Guess it's candle time," I said. Getting up, I found one in the drawer and lit it. The flame danced between us, soft and golden. "Your dad used to do this whenever the lights went out," I said. "He'd tell ghost stories just to make me scream." Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, that sounds like him." I looked at him, the light flickering over his face. There was something thoughtful in his eyes, something unreadable. Then he said quietly, "I think Dad's been keeping something from you." I froze. "What do you mean?" He looked down, hesitating. I shouldn't have said anything. "Forget it." "Ethan," I said, stepping closer. "What is it?" He met my eyes, conflicted. "It's about where he's been going lately." The air in the room shifted. Outside, thunder cracked again. Inside, my heart began to race. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. "I think Dad's seeing someone else." The candle flickered, and for a moment, the whole house seemed to go silent. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan's words kept echoing in my mind. "I think Dad's seeing someone else." The candle had burned down to a stub by the time I sat alone in the dark, trying to make sense of it all. Daniel had been distant, yes, but unfaithful? That didn't sound like him. And yet, the silence between us had been growing. Little cracks that had turned into quiet spaces, where love used to live. When the rain stopped, I found myself walking to the living room window. Outside, the world looked washed clean. But inside me, everything was clouded with doubt. That's when the memories started coming back in pieces. Like broken glass, I couldn't help but touch. It was 5 years ago when I first met Daniel. I was working at the local library, part-time, trying to rebuild after a messy divorce. He came in looking for books on woodworking, of all things. "I'm not really a reader," he'd said with a smile, "but I'm trying to build a bookshelf. Thought I should learn what kind of books deserve to sit on it." He had a quiet charm, the kind that didn't demand attention but still filled the room. He was a widower, raising a teenage son. I remember the small talk, the laughter, the way he looked at me like I was someone he hadn't expected to meet. He left with 2 books that day, and a promise to bring back the finished shelf so I could see it. He did. 2 weeks later, that was the start. The first time I met Ethan, he was standing on the porch, arms crossed, his eyes sharp with suspicion. He was 13, awkward, angry, protective. "Dad's cooking dinner," he'd said flatly. "He never cooks unless it's something serious." I smiled, unsure whether to laugh or run. But I stayed. Dinner that night was burnt at the edges, but the conversation was warm. Ethan didn't say much, but I caught him watching, curious, cautious, as if measuring whether I was safe enough to trust. It took months, but he eventually let me in. Not all the way, but enough to share small things. His art, his grades, his quiet fears about losing the last piece of his mom. I never tried to replace her. I only tried to make space for both her memory and my own presence. I thought we were happy then. But happiness has a way of fading without anyone noticing. After we got married, Daniel started working longer hours. The business trips grew more frequent, the calls shorter. Ethan left for college, and the house that had once been full of noise and hope began to echo. We stopped having breakfast together. Then we stopped talking about our days. And slowly, without realizing it, we stopped looking at each other the way we once did. Wasn't a fight. It wasn't a betrayal. It was something worse. Quiet distance, and I let it happen. The next morning, I found Ethan sitting at the dining table, eyes heavy with regret. "About last night," he said. "Maybe I shouldn't have said anything." "You can tell me if something's wrong," I said. But I need to know the truth. Why do you think he's seeing someone? He hesitated. He wasn't supposed to tell me, but I saw him at a cafe last month with a woman. They looked close. She touched his hand. He looked different, happier. I felt the air leave my lungs. Did he see you? He nodded slowly. Yeah, but we didn't talk about it. Maybe it's not what you think, I whispered. He shrugged. Maybe, but I thought you should know. Later that day, as I cleaned out the study, I found something that stopped me cold. It was an old envelope, tucked between Daniel's papers, yellowed, wrinkled, almost forgotten. On the front, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "For the woman who made him smile again." Inside was a faded photo, Daniel and me standing by the lake from years ago. We were laughing, but the message on the back wasn't written by me. It said, "Thank you for loving him when I couldn't." I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Who had written this? The handwriting was soft, looping, almost feminine, and at the bottom of the note was a name that sent a chill through me. With love, Claire, Ethan's mother. For a long moment, the room seemed to tilt. Claire had written this, after her diagnosis, maybe, before she passed. She'd known Daniel would move on. She'd known about me. The woman I had silently compared myself to for years had left her blessing. It wasn't guilt I felt then. It was something far deeper. Understanding. Maybe Daniel hadn't been distant because of someone else. Maybe he'd been carrying memories he didn't know how to share. I folded the letter carefully, tears blurring the ink. Ethan appeared at the doorway, his voice soft. "Are you okay?" I turned toward him, still holding the photo. "Ethan, did you know your mom wrote to me?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I handed him the letter. He read it, his face changing as his eyes moved across the words. Then he whispered, "That's impossible. My mom couldn't have written this." "Why not?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up at me, his expression haunted. "Because she didn't know who you were." The storm had returned by evening, same thunder, same restless wind. But this time, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was loaded. Ethan stood by the window, the letter still in his hand. His reflection in the glass looked older, heavier. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "How could she have written this? You didn't meet my dad until 2 years after she passed." I nodded slowly. "That's what I can't figure out." He turned toward me, his eyes searching mine. "Maybe Dad kept it for someone else. Maybe it's not even about you." "Then why was our photo inside?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Look at the handwriting. She knew me." He shook his head, pacing the room. "No, she couldn't have. She was gone before you came into our lives." The lightning flashed, and for a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be, lost, unsure, trying to make sense of a world that kept rewriting itself. "Maybe your dad told her about me," I said softly. "Maybe before she passed, he talked about moving on someday." He looked at me, eyes filled with confusion, and something that almost looked like pain. Why would he hide that from me? Maybe because he didn't know how to tell you that she gave him permission to love again. Ethan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "All this time, I thought he just forgot her." "He didn't," I whispered. "He carried her with him. That's probably why he's been so distant." Guilt does strange things to love. A car pulled into the driveway. Headlights swept across the room. Daniel. My heart kicked in my chest. Ethan stood quickly, his jaw tightening. "You should ask him. Right now." "I will," I said, though my voice betrayed my nerves. The front door opened. Daniel stepped in, shaking rain from his coat. "Why are all the lights off?" Power's been flickering, I said. We found something. He looked at me, then at Ethan. Something? Ethan held up the letter. This, Daniel froze. For a second, his expression softened, then hardened. Where did you find that? In your study, I said. Between old papers. He exhaled slowly, as if the air had been waiting years to leave his lungs. I thought I'd lost it. Who wrote it? I asked. He looked down, his fingers brushing the edges of the paper. Claire. Ethan stepped closer. But how? She didn't know her. Daniel hesitated. The thunder outside filled the pause. She didn't, he said finally. Not personally, but she knew of her. I frowned. Of me? He nodded. Before Claire passed, she asked me to promise one thing. That I'd find someone who could love Ethan as much as I did. Someone kind. Someone who wouldn't see him as a burden. He looked at me then, his voice quiet. I didn't know who you were back then. But I met you years later. And when I did, I realized she'd written that letter for whoever would come next. The room fell silent. The truth sat between us like a fragile flame. Ethan swallowed hard. So she really wanted you to move on? Yes, Daniel said. But I never wanted you to feel replaced. That's why I hid it. Ethan stared at him for a long time, then looked away. You should have told me. I know, Daniel said softly. But I was afraid. You were still hurting. So was I. The rain softened outside, turning from storm to mist. I could feel something shifting in the room. Not anger, but release. Daniel reached for Ethan's shoulder. But Ethan stepped back, his expression torn between love and betrayal. You should have trusted me with the truth, he said. All these years I blamed her for being here. He glanced at me then, and something in his eyes broke. You didn't deserve that. Ethan, I began, but he shook his head, smiling weakly. No, I mean it. You tried so hard to make this a family, and I made it harder. Daniel's voice cracked. We both did. The air felt lighter then. Fragile, but healing. For the first time in years, all three of us were in the same room, facing the same truth. Ethan turned to leave, but before he reached the hallway, he paused. Dad, he said quietly, that cafe you've been going to. The one downtown. Daniel blinked, confused. What about it? Ethan hesitated, then asked. You weren't meeting another woman there, were you? Daniel's brow furrowed. No, I was meeting someone who wanted to speak about your mother. My mother? He nodded slowly. Her sister. Ethan froze. Aunt Grace. Daniel gave a small nod. She reached out months ago. She wanted to tell you something, but I wasn't sure how you'd take it. Ethan's eyes darkened. She's the one who left us. After Mom died, she disappeared. Daniel sighed. She said she had a reason. She wanted to explain in person. Ethan shook his head, emotion rising. She doesn't get to walk back in after all these years and pretend it's fine. Ethan, I said gently. Maybe she has something you need to hear. He looked at me then, the storm flickering behind his eyes. If she does, it better be good. He turned and walked upstairs, leaving me and Daniel standing in the quiet. Daniel's voice was low when he finally spoke. There's something else she told me. I looked at him. What is it? He hesitated, his eyes clouded. Grace said, Claire left behind another letter. I frowned. Another one? He nodded. One she said was meant for you. My breath caught. For me? Daniel nodded slowly. She said it's hidden, somewhere only you'd understand. Outside, the thunder rolled again. Not loud this time, just enough to make my heart race. Where is it? I whispered. Daniel met my eyes. Grace wants to give it to you herself. The next morning came wrapped in fog, the kind that made the world look like it was holding its breath. I drove alone. Daniel had given me the address, a small cafe by the lake, the same one Ethan had mentioned, the same one that had started this whole storm. When I walked in, the bell over the door chimed softly, and there she was, Grace, older now, with silver in her hair, but her eyes, those eyes were the same ones in every photo of Claire. Calm, sad, kind. She stood when she saw me. "You must be her," she said softly. "The woman my sister wanted to meet." For a moment I couldn't speak. I didn't know she knew about me. Grace smiled faintly. "She didn't. But she imagined you." We sat down by the window. The lake outside was quiet, only small ripples breaking its surface. Grace placed a small envelope on the table. "This belongs to you." I stared at it. "Another letter?" She nodded. "Claire wrote it a week before she died. She told me to give it to the woman who would love Daniel after her." I hesitated, afraid of what it might say, afraid of what it might undo. Grace folded her hands. "Before you read it, you need to understand something. My sister wasn't just sick. She was scared, not of dying, but of what she was leaving behind." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" Grace's eyes softened. She thought Daniel was still in love with someone else. Someone from his past. My pulse quickened. "Someone else?" Grace nodded. "A woman he met before he married her. They had a brief connection. Nothing more. But it stayed with him. When Claire found out, she didn't confront him. She forgave him. She just made peace with the idea that one day, someone else might finish what she started, loving him." I sat back, heart aching. "That's why she wrote those letters." Grace nodded. "She believed love didn't end with her. She wanted it to survive her." The envelope lay between us like a small, sleeping truth. "Can I read it?" I asked. Grace smiled faintly. "That's why I came." I opened it carefully. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the words, they felt alive. "If you're reading this, it means you have loved Daniel through the same storm I once did. He is a good man, but he carries silence like armor. You'll wonder why he drifts, why he leaves a room without saying goodbye. It's not you. It's the way grief teaches you to survive. Please don't try to replace me. Just remind him that love doesn't vanish. It changes shape." I swallowed hard. My hands trembled as I read the last line. "And if you ever meet my son, tell him I never left. I just stayed where love could still find him." When I looked up, Grace was crying quietly. She wrote that the night before she went into the hospital. She wanted peace for everyone she loved. I folded the letter carefully. My voice came out small. "Ethan should see this." Grace nodded. "Yes. He deserves to know his mother's truth." By the time I got home, the rain had started again. Ethan was sitting on the porch, waiting. "Where were you?" he asked. "I met your aunt," I said softly. His expression tightened. "Aunt Grace." I nodded and handed him the letter. "This is from your mother." He took it carefully, reading it under the porch light. I watched as his face shifted, confusion, disbelief, then something deeper. When he finished, he just sat there, silent. "Ethan," I said quietly. He looked up, tears filling his eyes. She knew. She knew I'd blame everyone. She even knew you'd try to fix it all. I reached for his hand. "She wanted you to forgive." He nodded slowly. "I want to. I really do." Then his voice broke. "But it's hard." "I know," I whispered. "But you're not alone in this anymore." He looked at me, really looked, and something inside him softened. The years of tension between us began to fade, replaced by something fragile but real. Thank you, he said, for staying. I promised I would, I said. The front door opened. Daniel stepped out, rain on his coat. You saw Grace, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. And I know everything now. He nodded, his shoulders heavy. Then you know why I couldn't talk about it. I thought if I kept it buried, maybe we could move on. I stepped closer. But silence doesn't heal what it hides, Daniel. He closed his eyes. You're right. For a moment, it was just the three of us, standing there in the rain, bound by the same grief, the same love, the same truth that had kept us apart. Ethan broke the silence. So what happens now? Daniel looked at me, eyes filled with apology. That depends on what she decides. Me? I asked. He nodded. You didn't sign up for this kind of history. I looked at him. The man who had loved me quietly, imperfectly, but completely. And then at Ethan, the boy who had become a man right in front of me, carrying both his parents' hearts in his own. I just need time, I said softly. Daniel nodded. Take all you need. The rain grew heavier. Ethan went inside, leaving Daniel and me on the porch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the letter. She said love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. Daniel met my eyes. Do you believe that? I nodded slowly. I want to. He took a step closer. And maybe we still have a chance. The thunder rumbled far off, like a warning, or a blessing. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, at the house behind us, at the light spilling through the window where Ethan sat reading his. Mother's words again. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was the moment. Before a choice. The one that could rebuild everything. Or break it again. The night after everything came out, the house was quieter than I'd ever known it. The rain that had followed us all week had finally stopped, and the windows glowed faintly with the soft reflection of dawn. I sat at the edge of my bed, holding the photo frame that had once hung in the hallway. The one of our whole family, taken back when laughter still lived here. There was a gentle knock on my door. I didn't have to ask who it was. Come in, I said softly. Ethan stepped inside. His eyes were tired but calmer. The storm between us had passed, leaving something fragile but honest in its place. He looked around the room for a moment, as if gathering the right words from the air. I didn't sleep, he admitted. Me neither, I whispered. He gave a faint smile. I guess that's fair. We stood there, two people who had finally said everything, but still had one last thing left to understand. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. Not then, not now. I know. My voice cracked slightly. You were protecting everyone in your own way. Even me. He nodded, stepping closer. I thought silence was easier, but it only built walls I couldn't see over. I met his eyes, those familiar eyes that once looked at me like I was home, and now only asked for forgiveness. Maybe silence was the only thing we knew how to use, I said. He sat on the chair near the window. Morning light touched his face, soft and forgiving. Mum used to say love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means knowing when to let go. I smiled faintly. She was right. There was a long pause, the kind that felt heavy but necessary. I'll be moving out, he finally said, breaking the quiet. It's time. For both of us. My heart sank, but deep down I knew it was the right choice. You'll always have a place here, Ethan. Always. He looked at me with gratitude. And for the first time in years, his expression carried peace instead of confusion. I know, he said gently, but I need to find my own. We talked for hours that morning, not about what could have been, but about what was. About forgiveness. About the strength it takes to rebuild a family not from perfection, but from honesty. Before he left, He placed something on the dresser, a folded letter, sealed with care. For later, he said. I didn't open it until that night. The house was quiet again, but no longer lonely. I unfolded the letter slowly, feeling the paper tremble in my hands. Mara, I never forgot the day you believed in me, when no one else did. You showed me what family means, not by blood, but by choice. You taught me to see beyond mistakes, beyond silence. I walked into your room that morning years ago by accident, but somehow it became the moment I realized you were the heart that held this family together. I couldn't tell you then. It wasn't my place, and I didn't have the words. Now I do. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for teaching me how to forgive myself. Ethan, I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of everything that had once been unsaid. Outside, the sky turned gold with sunrise. I walked to the window and saw Ethan standing by his car. Looking back once, he lifted his hand in a quiet wave. I returned it, my eyes wet but smiling. Some stories don't end with grand gestures or dramatic goodbyes. Some end softly, with understanding. Weeks passed. Life began to move again. I found myself laughing more, breathing easier. The house, though emptier, felt lighter. One afternoon, as I rearranged the shelves, I found another small envelope tucked behind the photo frame. It was dated months before, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. It was from Ethan's mother. If you ever read this, it means Ethan has found his way back to you. Take care of him like you always have, with patience, with grace, with love that asks for nothing back, because that's what makes a family last. I smiled through the tears. Somehow, even in her absence, she had known this day would come. I placed both letters, hers and his, inside the same frame behind our family photo. A reminder that love doesn't always fade. Sometimes it simply changes shape. That evening, I sat by the window again. The wind carried the scent of rain and spring. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down. Just peace. And maybe, in that peace, a quiet kind of love still lived. One built not on romance, but on forgiveness, on lessons learned, on hearts mended in silence. I looked out toward the fading light and whispered, "We're okay now." The last rays of sun touched the photo on the wall. A family once broken, now whole in its own way. And that was enough.